And awesome. Yeah. CSS Transitions. Yes, I am recording. CSS Transitions are easy to overdo, but seeing the basics of them and some like appropriate usages of them help. We're going to start off kind of abstract here just to see their syntax and how they work. But they are exactly as they sound. They transition styles from one set to another. So let's say I wanted this box to turn red over time. I don't want it just to flash, because if I made a sudden change to my CSS, it flashes for the user. It's not a nice, smooth lead-in. So how do we make it transition? With CSS Transitions. Okay. Put the write-up in Slack. Yeah, it's already there. Okay. So there's a few properties we need to look at to understand transition, and then we'll look at how to kind of combine them all at one if we need to. But there are four main properties to a transition. And you don't have to use all of them, but you do have to use some of them. So those properties are transition property, transition duration, transition timing function, and transition delay. So these four properties can be added together to make one of these effects to the user. So let's start with a simple one. We would like to make a transition that when I hover over this box, it grows. It gets 200 pixels taller. And it's not quick. It doesn't snap like this. We should literally see the box grow down the page. Does anyone know what a pseudo selector is in CSS? Pseudo selectors. With the colon. One that you may have seen so far is the ability to hover over something. If you hover over something, I'll then say, if I'm hovering over it, change the background color to fire brick and make its height 400 pixels. And this is almost like writing a little JavaScript function. It's a CSS pseudo selector. They act kind of like functions. If I hover over this, it snaps to that effect. My cursor is over it without ever having to include JavaScript. But it is snappy. So I'd like this to happen over time. So what you do with transitions is you give yourself a base class. What does my style start as? And then I give myself some sort of transition class. Where do I want it to end up? And I'm just using a hover in this case. We'll use other examples of like maybe a button click is what triggers it, not a hover. But something needs to happen, and then new styles need to occur off of that. Well, which one do we give the transition properties to? The base class or the class that we're transitioning to? I put it on here for a while, for a minute, and then I realized it needs to be on the base class. And we'll look at why, but you want to put it on your default style class. So first, transition property. This is saying, what would you like me to transition off of what you have already declared? Well, in this case, all I want to transition is the height. I'm okay with the color snapping. I want the height to grow though. So the property I would like you to transition is my height. Cool. Transition duration. Who wants to take a guess on what that is for? How long does it take to transition from this stage of 200 pixels tall to 400 pixels tall? Let's say 250 milliseconds. You can say, yeah, this is a quarter of a second, or you can use second syntax. You can say 1 second. Actually, let's do a half a second, so 500 milliseconds. And just by saying the property and how long, whoops, let's see if that is enough for our transition. Ooh, how satisfying. I could do this all day for real though. But there's more. So there's transition timing function and transition delay. And this is saying more of when should the transition occur and how should it transition. What we're seeing right here is the default. This is called a linear transition. It's like a for loop, one thing at a time. It's not speeding up or slowing down. It's taking the same pace to get to from beginning to end. So transition timing function allows you to change the way it transitions. Do we want it to go linear? Do we want it to kind of bounce or tick? We can look at different options. So I'm going to name transition timing function. And by default, it's linear. So if I name it linear, it's going to stay as it was. But let's see if there's another option here. I'm going to press some letters because I don't even know what some of these are. There's a couple preset ones. What's that? Oh yeah, ease in. There we go. So now it's going to start slow and then speed up. There's a ease out. So it starts fast and slows down. That's nice. Okay. There's ease in, out. Start slow, speed up, stop slow. It's not really long enough for us to see that, so maybe let's put that at 1 second and see it grow over time. Cool. And then there's one other one we'll look at shortly here. Well, let's just keep that at ease in currently. So the last one is transition delay. We want to take a gander at what that does. Yeah, when I hover over it, don't happen immediately, wait a split second, and then transition. So I'll tell it to wait half a second. So it's a little larger than maybe what I do, but now when I hover, it waits half second and then transitions. Same with the transition going backwards. Cool, so any questions on the base properties here, how I'm using them? Fortunately with CSS, it's not a whole lot of logic based, right? It's rule based, so as long as you understand the rule, your CSS will work. But what happens if we disobey the rule and we put the transition on the class that is actually doing the transition? What has changed about my transition now? Yeah, notice it's transitioning when I hover, but when I go off the hover, it doesn't transition back, it snaps back. So that is why we want the transition properties to be up in the base class, because it will transition to the new style and transition back to its original style.
If you move the mouse off of it before it finishes the transition,
stops right there and goes back. They're very smart, these transitions. Let's transition more things. I would also like to transition the background color. Great. So I'm going to add that to the list of transition properties. And notice from the page load, it transitioned everything. My blue even fades in, a nice little fade in now. Oh, it did it once. I guess we're not getting lucky. But now, this nice little color switch, it hits a purple for a second. There's all sorts of magic going on there. Let's do something maybe a little bit, instead of blue to red, let's do blue to white, maybe. So we get this. If you want something to fade in, fade out. Alpha values and such. Yeah, this isn't a true fade in, fade out. If I wanted to actually fade in, it'd be like an opacity. I could say your opacity starts at 1, you're fully opaque, but I would like you to also transition your opacity. So where I'd like to transition it to is 0. I want you to be invisible by the time you hit here. And just to show you this, I'm going to keep this as red to see if we still see the color red or if we see nothing. Disappeared. I go off of it, it comes back. I've made it opaque. You can't see it. If there's elements behind it, those would show up because now there's nothing in front of it that we can see. Okay, just for kicks, let's add one more. Border radius. Start off at 0, but we're going to transition to a border radius of maybe 15 pixels so we can see it. We'll add that to our transition properties. And now we get this nice rounded corner effect. Oh, it disappeared, dang it. Gotta take that opacity off so we can see what's going on. Okay. We get this nice corners at the end, and then it goes back to being a rigid box. So you can really transition most CSS properties, sizes, widths, lengths, colors, what have you. But you don't have to say all 4 of these. Ones that are optional, you don't have to name a delay, right? I don't have to name a delay this if I don't want. Additionally, I don't need to give it a timing function. If I'm okay with linear, I don't need to declare that. But what I do need to declare is what to transition and how long should I transition it for. Those are for sure. Well, this is kind of like margin. You know how you can say margin top, bottom, left, right? There's another syntax where we can use all 4 of these in one word. So you don't have to declare them all separately. So if I wanted to do this all at once, I could use the single transition property, transition, and the order is exactly as we see it here. So first, what property? Well, I would like height, background, color, and border radius. Next, what is your duration? I want 1 second. And I'll just leave it at that and comment this out. That didn't work. Do these have to be comma separated? Let's see. Yes. So your transition properties have to be comma separated. So I'm using this selector here, but this is just like the margin top, left, bottom, right. Property is the first, duration is the second. If I want to give a timing function, I could then say ease in. Now it has the timing function as well. And then I could then give it the delay. We'll say 500 milliseconds and get that delay to still work. Cool, so any questions on these base styles? We're gonna go to a bigger example next. So questions on these 4 properties. There aren't any other ones. These are the transition properties.
Can you do the first ID box has to be 1?
Yeah.
0, you're just saying 1 is like fully opaque.
1 is fully opaque, 0 is completely invisible.
So they're going to.
Yep. If you go above 1, it does nothing. If you go below 0, it does nothing. 0 to 1 is your scaling there.
Question, so you can use this for any property or other.
Yeah, think of navbar. You click a navbar menu and the navbar slides in, CSS transition.
Oh, no, but if it were like any of the properties like
Yeah, yeah. There's certain ones that you can't, but those are kind of, you'll run into them. There's not very many. Most CSS properties you can transition. I believe W3 has an exhaustive list of all transitionable properties and kind of gives you a full list there. Yeah, we're just using the hover pseudo selector to enact this one, but let's do one now that involves JavaScript. A button click should trigger our transition, and how do we affect that? It's a little bit more. Are we good on these 4 properties though? We're seeing what they're doing. What do I want to transition? How long? How should it transition? And should I wait before I transition? You can do them all separate, or I can do them all at once in this order. Okay, so that is example 1 in the notes that I'll give out. I'll make sure it's big and obvious here. It'll say example 1. And now we'll move on to example 2. And all I had right now was this box. Like, there was minimal HTML going on. Everything was CSS. What I would like to do is make an nav bar. Everything is lining up right now because I told my body of my website to be a flex box. So everything is just lining up naturally for me here. But we're gonna quickly overwrite that because this is our nav bar. And what we would like is we're gonna have a button. And I'm just gonna fake a sandwich menu here. So here's my sandwich button. When I click this, I would like this nav bar to slide in from the left. When I click it again, I'd like it to slide back out. This is showing more of like an actual use of transitions, but you'll do a lot with just hover, especially with like icons like LinkedIn or Facebook. You hover over it, you get the color change. That's all with what we were doing here. Okay, so I'm going to give my nav bar my div, which I should just make a nav because we have semantic tags and that's better. And I'll say ID nav bar. And now I'll go style it and make things happen. So first, let's set up our nav bar. Let's make it the full page height, 100 viewer height. And so we can see it, we'll give it a background color of something darker. But I really want it to fit this whole side here, but it's getting pushed out of the way from these other elements. What property can you give a div or any CSS or HTML property to make it sit on top of the page? It doesn't care about what it's around. What's that? Yeah, let's make it absolute. Position, absolute. And now it just floats. Doesn't care what's on the page, it's going to sit on top of it. Well, with position absolute, you can tell it where to sit. So how do I tell it to sit on the left-hand side? Left 0. Okay. My nav bar is on the left. Wonderful. I'm going to give it a little bit more width, 200 pixels. And, oh, that's too big, 100 pixels. And so the links kind of show up nicer. I'm going to make it a flex box as well. Flex direction column. And align the items in the center. Okay, that's a bit better. I don't like how see-through this is, so we'll change that. And all the divs in the nav bar, we'll give them a color of white so we can see them. Nav bar, nailed it. Okay, now our button click needs to move this left and right. What have I declared here? This is my base style. This is my starting point. So I now need to declare where would I like it to go. All doing CSS. But when you are position absolute, you can put yourself anywhere on the page, and that includes off the page. If I say left 0, it's going to stick the left-hand side. But notice if I say left -50 pixels, it's now halfway off the page. And if I say -100 pixels, it looks like it disappears, but really it's sitting offside the page over here, just waiting for the user to bring it on the page through some sort of event. So my starting point is right up next to the left side, but my ending point is going to be -100 pixels off the left side, so it looks like it disappears. So I'm going to call this, I'm going to give this a class. I'm going to call it navbar closed. And say, when you're closed, you should be left -100 pixels. Cool. So I have my starting point, what it looks like, where it's sitting, and where I'd like it to go. Now I need to somehow be able to, when they click this button, I need to add this to my nav bar.
I don't understand when you put closed on the end of it.
That is not a preset word. I made that up because it's a class name that's telling me what this is for. This class is for when the nav bar should be closed. So I could just call this nav bar to the left. But these are more semantically pleasing. This is my class for when it's closed. Really, that just means it's off the page.
And it has to be a class on ID.
Yeah, you don't want to toggle, give multiple IDs. They're kind of the singular sense. So really, if I want to be fair with this, I should probably make this a class 2, just so I'm staying consistent.
Basically, another way of doing display you're sliding it off the page.
Display none, you cannot transition display none. That's the
You're
issue.
using a transition.
Yeah, so
Same concept.
we're going to make this slide off the page and slide on. If I said display none, even if I transitioned it, it's just going to disappear. So that's why using opacity or positioning is nice to make things move and look like they disappear. But now we need JavaScript to enact this because it's all off of a button click and that's user interaction. So we're going to make a JavaScript page. We're going to link it to our HTML. And we're gonna grab this navbar by its class name, navbar. So const navbar equals document.get element by class name, navbar. And what data type will navbar be right now? If I console log to navbar, what would we see? Denoted by this selector. This will always return the same data type. What if I have multiple elements with the same class? What do I got to get back? An array. So even if there's only one item with this class, this is still going to be an array. Let's see that just real quickly here so we know. Here's my HTML collection. It's an array with one item in it. At index 0, that is my navbar. So I'm going to say get elements by class name navbar and just give me the first one. Bracket 0 of that array. And now navbar is the individual object, my navbar. Well, I also need my button because it needs a click event on it. So let's give this an ID for our clicking. We'll call it nav button. And we'll const nav button. It's too close to nav bar. We'll say button document get element by ID nav button, and we'll add a click event to it. Using our fancy ES6 arrow syntax. Yes. Do I need to prevent the default? It's not a submit event. There is no default event on a click. Well, it is. It's the button click, and we want that. So we don't need to prevent the default unless it's a submit. That's good. Okay, so on click, we need to add the class to this to tell it to be closed. Because right now, my navbar element just has this class added. This one has not been added, right? It's on my HTML, all I have is navbar. But I really need to add is nav close, because notice when I add this manually, it does nothing. Let's do this. So that's what we want. So we need a what's happening here? Do I need to keep this as an ID? Let's see. One sec, I'm working this out. Class nav closed. Oh, but then yeah, you're all watching this. It's like, what is he doing? He doesn't know. Okay. Let's try class nav closed. Yeah, the ID is too specific. It's all right, we'll work this out in JavaScript. That's where we work out our problems, right? So on button click, we would like to have this added so this moves. Well, how do I change the style of an HTML element in JavaScript? How do I add or remove a class from an element? So I could say navbar.style dot something and change, a specific property like font size, but I want to add that new class. Yeah, I can say, hey, navbar, your class list, it should add the following class, navbar closed, which is our class here. When you get clicked, add this. Well, let's refresh and see. Did I leave it on here? No.
Is it still ID on your HTML?
Yeah, ID navbar.
Is that what you changed it to class? Yeah, in CSS you changed it to class.
Thank you for catching this. I would have been wandering for a minute there. That's better. Okay. But we're having a problem with ordering. For some reason, this is getting overwritten. So let's see if we can also remove the other one. I don't think we'll want to do this. Yeah, but they'll be in the order that we're added. So the first one will say you sit here, then the second one should override it. We don't want to remove the navbar class on click. I mean, this is acting like it's not even doing anything. Am I even connected to my JavaScript? I have to be. Huh. I promise this is not as hard as I'm making it look. Nav bar. Maybe if I keep clicking it, it will eventually work. Does anyone do this? I know I'm right, so eventually we'll figure it out. Think tank in here. I'm gonna try something disgusting. 1 second. This is not dry at all. There's no way to transition it if I do it that way. Yeah, it's not even listening.
Maybe this would look like something else.
Nav button.
Pops up, do like alert, something.
Yeah, see if it's connected. If I spend more than another minute on this, I'm going to fix it in my own time and then show you why it wasn't working later. Because I am connected. What is happening? Oh, that's an issue. We don't have our navbar. Okay, console log save the day. I'm saying get elements by class name navbar. And since I changed it to an ID, it can't find it. Let's try that. What did I do? Get elements. I'm loving this, by the way. I'd be very afraid if it was quiet, but this is great. So now let's see if the class list is at least toggling now. See if we can debug why this isn't working. So we'll go to my elements. We'll look at the nav here, and it has closed. It was. Well, so the nav bar right here just has the ID, but when I click the button, bam, the class shows up. So we know our JavaScript is doing what we asked it to, but this is not moving. Yeah, something in our CSS is having fun with us.
It's not because the ID is overriding the class.
Maybe yeah. I think these are all valid points. I'm gonna have to try a couple of them. Man, this is so much easier in React. Okay. You're witnessing the first time my transition navbar doesn't work. I'm really sad about it. Okay, we're gonna try the class one more time. If this doesn't work, we will give you the exercise and continue forward so I can fix this. What's that?
First of all, get elements.
But here it says that you're standard.
Yeah, in CSS it's ID. So get back to class. I did it. It was the ID. We've solved it, people. The ID was overriding the class, which makes sense. But what's happening? I click it once and it goes off the page, and I click it again and never comes back. So class list has a .add, a .remove, and it also has a really fancy .toggle. It'll add it if it's not there, it'll remove it if it's not. So now, great, my navbar is toggling. It's not transitioning though. So which one of these three do I give the transition to? Coming full circle here. Yeah, the base class. So we're gonna say transition, and what property do we need to transition? What is changing in each, from this to closed? Left. Yeah, not position absolute, but the actual positioning is what's changing. So we're saying transition the left property, take 250 milliseconds, do it linear, and that's all I want. Ooh. Now, what if you're someone that's like, I don't like left-hand nav bars? Great. Comment all of these, make them right. And then we're going to say move to the right, -100. Oh, now it's on the right. Top. That's different. That won't work. No, you'd have to change its height to width and all that. But just to show you, like, you can overdo it with transitions pretty easily. When someone visits your site, they don't want everything to be moving. They might get motion sickness. Move the things that you expect to move when you interact with the website. Nav bars, some icons, when you hover over them, they change slightly. They don't blow up and bounce around the page. Meaningful transitions. Oops.